How do I know when I'm ovulating? So let's talk about this tonight and let's do a live Q&A. So this gives you an opportunity to ask any questions if you would like. I am Michelle Cooke, a hormone and fertility naturopath, and I would love to share with you ways to identify if you're ovulating, what to look for, what methods not to use, what I would recommend using instead. So we're going to deep dive into that tonight, and I'm so excited to share with you all the information in regards to this. Please say hi in the comments. I love likes, loves, hit the emojis, let me know where you're from. I am actually on both Instagram and Facebook Live tonight, so it's the first time I've done this, so please bear with me. So I'm very excited, so let's dive in. Okay, so hello to people that are joining. Hi Shell, how are you going there? I'll just see how Facebook is going as well. So nice to have you here. Okay, let's get started. I've just got some notes because I do have a bit of a habit of rambling, so I apologize for that in advance. Okay, so let's get to it. So basically, in terms of ovulation and tracking ovulation, I definitely wouldn't recommend using a period app and relying on that information to tell you when you're ovulating. And that's basically because you're just putting the data in there, so you're telling it how long your cycle is. So, you might be popping in there that it's calculating your cycle length is 32 days. The next one might be 34 days. The next one might be 28 days. And then basically what it's doing is it's gathering that data and kind of averaging it out and working out from a technical perspective what your ovulation time might be. So it's kind of aiming for the middle-ish there based on the average of the lengths that you've put and all the data that you've put in there. So it's just going bzz, 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 technical things, trying to decide what's going on, and it's just going to work out an average. So please don't rely upon period apps to sort of justify when ovulation takes place, because it's simply not accurate and it doesn't know what your body's going through at the time. So you could be stressed and this delays ovulation, but the app doesn't know that. It's just going from the data that you've put in there. So you know how you're putting in, today I've got my period, it's heavy this day, it's a bit light, it's moderate, etc. So you're putting all that in, and then you're putting in all the other data as well. So it's just calculating based on that. So definitely do not predict ovulation according to those period apps, okay? But in saying that, those period apps are absolutely fantastic for recording information about your cycle. So your menstrual cycle includes the whole cycle, okay? So it includes your period and all the time up until your next period as well. So that's what a menstrual cycle is. So it's excellent for recording if your periods are heavy, light, moderate, if you're getting cramping, PMS, all those kind of things are really, really important to document. So I would highly recommend using it in that case. So you're probably wondering, what do I use then? Does anyone have any ideas? Just pop it in the comments there for me. What would you use instead, do you think? So I'll just give you a minute. So let's just dive in and discuss it anyway. Maybe you're a bit shy and that's okay. That's totally fine. Let's jump in. So basically what I would recommend is using an ovulation or basal body temperature thermometer, okay? So this one here, you can get it easily at, I hope you can see that okay. And I'll show it to you guys as well on Instagram. So this basal body thermometer or ovulation or fertility thermometer is the one that you should be looking at getting. So that one there, okay? So it's just Surgipack, available from a lot of pharmacies. So that's what I'd recommend doing. So actually recording your temperature each day with this thermometer, that's going to give you a really good insight as to whether ovulation has actually taken place or not. It is retrospective, so you'll look back and go, okay, I did ovulate that time. But it's not actually going to warn the approach of ovulation. So that's really important to remember as well. But it is an excellent purchase, and I would recommend doing that. Please don't use a normal thermometer because there isn't those small increments in temperature. So you can't really see whether you're actually ovulating or not by using those, because the range of temperatures are way too broad, and it's not going to pick up those tiny little indifferences in temperature. I've had patients that have come to me and they've brought their charts in and they said, I've been charting, I've been using a thermometer, and I always ask them which type of thermometer that they've been using. And some people actually will tend to just buy just a normal thermometer and wonder why they can't really see those differences in temperature. I had a patient say to me, I can't really see when I'm ovulating. And that's what will happen, because you can't see those small little increments, and they are very tiny, but we need that thermometer to actually pick up on those small increments. So have a look at that. Now, the other thing I would recommend coupling with the temperature method, because that's what that's known as, is the cervical mucus method, okay? So the cervical mucus method is basically looking at what is happening downstairs, okay? So what is happening at your vulva? The vulva is basically the external part of your vagina, so it's basically the lips, so to speak. What is happening with your vaginal lips or vulva, okay? What is the sensation down there? So that's what you have to be looking for. What does it feel like today? Does it feel dry? Does it feel moist? Does it feel tacky? Does it feel wet? Does it feel slippery? Sometimes you'll be sort of walking along and there'll be this big avalanche, and you kind of say to yourself, what is happening? Is that my period? Did I wee myself? What's happening? I'm going to have to, look further into this. And usually it will be your cervical mucus plug. So, when you're the most fertile, the cervical mucus will actually come down into your underwear, and it leaves the cervix open so that the sperm can gain entry there, okay? So basically it's just observing each day, what do you actually feel there? Now, everybody is very different in terms of cervical mucus patterns. So there's a basic infertile pattern number 1 and a basic infertile pattern number 2. So you might be the BIP1, or the basic infertile phase 1, which means that you're dry most of the time, okay? So you could be dry most of your cycle, and that's the basic infertile pattern number 1, type 1. Or you could be basic infertile pattern number 2. So this can be sort of slightly moist most of the time, but it's unchanging, okay? So it stays like that most of the cycle, and that's your pattern. So everybody's pattern is very different. So it's all about getting to know your body individually and sort of knowing yourself on a very intimate level. You could also be a combination of those types. So you could have some days that are dry and some days that are slightly moist, particularly if your cycle is quite long. So if it's longer than 35 days, you might actually experience both types of these. So see how everybody is very different, and you need to kind of get to know you and what your basic infertile pattern is. So that's the non-fertile phase. So when you're looking at the fertile phase, then what do you look for? You look for a change in your basic and fertile pattern. So just say you're dry all the time, all of a sudden you're starting to get moist, you're starting to get wet, then it goes to slippery. That's a change in your cervical mucus, okay? So if you're slightly moist all the time, perhaps you're more wet then instead. That's a change to your non-fertile or infertile mucus, okay? So it's that change that you're looking for, that's different to your normal. So keeping an eye out for that, that's going to indicate that you're actually fertile. So that change in fertile in your cervical mucus will indicate if you're actually fertile or not. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Sometimes I feel like I'm going around and round in circles trying to explain it, but hopefully that makes sense. If it does, just pop a little like there for me. And if you've got any questions along the way, please let me know. I would love to answer those for you. Oh, great, Erin. Yep. Yes, so completely. Great. It does take a while to sort of work out what your infertile mucus is like and what your fertile mucus is like. Usually it takes about sort of 3 cycles for women to kind of get the gist of it. It just takes a bit of practice, sort of identifying what that is, jotting down what you're noticing each day. A good time to do that is when you go to the toilet. So go to the toilet, assess what's happening there, and before you do a wee, just kind of assessing what's the sensation, what's in my underwear, can I see something, is it creamy, is it tacky, is it moist, is it slippery, is it wet, what's going on there? So you're kind of feeling the sensation, you're looking and observing in the underwear as well, so just seeing what's happening there, and that will sort of clarify it for you. I don't usually recommend sort of popping your fingers into the vaginal cavity to see what type of mucus is there, because that can stimulate sort of lubricating sort of sensations there that can kind of confuse, it confuses you and you can't really see what's happening with the actual cervical mucus. It just sort of stimulates, some arousal fluids instead. So you don't want to get confused. So just purely observing each day, particularly when you go to the toilet. So before you actually go, just observing, what is it feeling like? What does it look like? What can you see? And throughout the day as well, of course. So coupling both those things, so the temperature method and the cervical mucus method, is absolutely key in recognizing when you're ovulating. And it can warn the approach of ovulation as well, which is really, really important. Whereas the temperature method doesn't. You kind of look back and go, oh, I did ovulate then. Now let me just see if there's any questions. So I'm just going to pop on Instagram for a minute. Okay, great questions, Arne. So what temperature should you be when you're ovulating? So that's a really good question. So everybody's a little bit different. So basically what you'll see on the chart is there'll be a little dip in the temperature. So it will go down sort of 0.3 of a degree. And then it will go through a steep rise, okay? And that's when you know that ovulation's taken place, particularly if that temperature stays up. If it starts coming down again, that's kind of an attempt at ovulation, but it didn't actually happen. So you're looking for that slight dip, so it goes a little bit lower than the previous 6 temperatures, and then you'll see a rise, and it will stay up that sort of whole time until your next period. So it's important to look for that, and quite often it will be quite a sharp rise. in temperature, and that's when you know that you've got sort of healthy sort of progesterone levels happening. Sometimes it might not be as obvious, but there's still a rise there. So it just takes practice to sort of observe that and know if that's ovulation or if it's an attempt at ovulation. Sometimes your body can do little jump starts in terms of ovulation. So it tries to ovulate and then it doesn't. And quite often this will happen if you're stressed. So stress will delay ovulation. It will go to happen, and then basically your body will steal pregnenolone, which is a hormone that makes progesterone, and it will take away from the fertility side of things or the reproductive health side of things, because that's not important. So it's working from a primal kind of aspect. So it goes back to the caveman days, and basically, you know, it's all about survival. So if the body thinks you're stressed, it thinks that you're in danger. It thinks that, you know, a lion or tiger is chasing you and you're in extreme danger. Even though it might be a small stress, your body doesn't know the difference between a huge, massive stress or a small stress. So either way, it will shut off your reproductive system because it's not important to actually conceive at that time, and it's not safe to do so. So it's just giving you that fuel to run, so that fight or flight response. So that was a really great question, Zane. Sorry if I ramble on. I just get very excited about this topic. Now let's see if there's any other questions. Okay, so great question, Erin. So how often should you try to conceive in that fertile window? So basically, as soon as you feel that sort of change in cervical mucus, apart from what you notice, you know, in your non-fertile phase, so whether it be dry or slightly moist, that's when I would actually attempt to conceive every day during that time. But to save the stress, usually I recommend, you know, to my patients sort of in the non-fertile phase, try to conceive, you know, every 2 to 3 days if you can. And then during the fertile phase, you know, try to do sort of every day if you can. Because you could actually probably catch it prior to, because sometimes you can actually be fertile prior to the main peak day of ovulation, if that makes sense. So the main peak day could be the day of slippery mucus. So sometimes it might go from moist to wet to slippery. And that last day of sort of fertile mucus could be when you have ovulated, but you could also ovulate sort of 2 days before and 2 days after. So that's why you kind of have to try and catch it around that time if you can. So yeah, sometimes it's easier just to kind of go, oh, okay, we'll kind of try and conceive every sort of 3 days or so in the non-fertile phase, and then when you're kind of approaching that phase, if you can do daily, that would be good. Let me see if there's any other questions. So Erin asks, every day or every other day? Oh, okay, I assume that's to do with how often you're trying to conceive in the fertile window. Yeah. When you wipe, you can often see it. Hey. Ah, yeah, okay. So I assume that you're talking about the cervical mucus, so the fertile mucus. So yeah, sometimes you can. It just depends what type of mucus that you've got going on. If it's non-fertile and it's dry, obviously you're not going to see that. But if it's the really fertile mucus, so if it's, you know, the slippery kind, you can really feel that, and you can feel that when you go to wipe, it feels like the tissue just slips right back. I don't know if you've had that happen before, Erin, but that's when you really know that that's the absolute peak day of ovulation. But as I said, it could occur, 2 days prior to that or 2 days after. We don't know the exact sort of time, but it sort of gives you a very good guide, doesn't it? Because it kind of shortens it down to that little time frame. So you can see if it's particularly slippery. If it's a bit moist, you might see it on the tissue there as well. And you can definitely see and feel it in your underwear as well, that's for sure. Great question. Oh, that's great, Zane. I'm glad that was a good explanation. I feel like I'm all over the place at the moment with everything that's happening with the moon this week. It's a little bit crazy energy. Great info. Oh, thanks, Erin. Okay, any more questions? I can't actually see if there's any questions on Facebook, so I apologize in advance if I don't see your question. But if you do have a question, just be sure to pop it down below. If you're too shy to ask me live, that's totally fine, but just remember that no question is a silly question, and there's always going to be someone that will be thinking the same thing and they're not sure. So definitely just pop it down below, even afterwards in the replay, and I will come back and answer that for you. Now I'm just going to check my notes because I do ramble quite a lot, so I just want to make sure that I'm sticking on track. The other thing is, in terms of ovulation, you should never assume that it's actually day 14. So that would probably, but not always, occur if you've got a 28-day cycle. So normally, ovulation takes place sort of 2 weeks prior to your next period. Technically, it can occur sort of 11 to 17 days before your next period. So there really is a variation there, so you should never assume that it's day 14. Another reason why you shouldn't assume that it's day 14 is because of your cycle length. So if you've got a longer cycle, it could occur later on in that menstrual cycle, which I see quite commonly. Usually it doesn't occur day 14 for you. It might be a little bit later on because your cycle is longer. Does that make sense? So, and then your period will occur 11 to 17 days following that. So definitely don't assume that it's day 14. That's really, really important. Now, the other thing is that ovulation can be delayed by numerous things. So it can be delayed by stress. It can be delayed by overeating, undereating. Also, if you're underweight or overweight, this can interfere with ovulation as well. If you're jet lagged, if you're tired, all these things, even lack of sleep, can delay ovulation as well. And also jet lag and lack of sleep can mess with your temperature as well. So that's important to consider as well when you're actually charting your temperature. There might be a bit of a wonky rise, and that might actually take place because of the jet lag, or if you're hungover, or if you've had a late night or something like that, that can alter your temperature as well. So that's important to remember. Now, so I talked about the sensation that you feel there, so at the vulva, so don't forget about that. Now, I think I've pretty much covered it all. So basically the key takeaways are: don't rely on a period app in terms of determining ovulation and when it's going to occur. So sometimes I have patients coming in and they say, they show me their app and they say, ovulation is going to take place soon, but it says that it's late. But that's according to the app. And remember, that's just calculations. It's just, creating data based on what you've actually placed into that. According to your cycle length, it will determine an average, and it will determine roughly when ovulation takes place. But the app doesn't know. Technology is pretty amazing, but it's not that amazing. If you have any more questions, please let me know. So just pop them here. So this is something I actually do with my patients day in, day out. So whether they're trying to conceive, whether they're trying to avoid conception, whether they are coming to me for some sort of hormone imbalance, PCOS, endometriosis, fibroids, I always get them to chart, because it gives us so much information about whether ovulation has taken place or not, how long their follicular phase is, and how long their luteal phase is. So the follicular phase occurs prior to ovulation, okay? So that's the period before ovulation, the time before ovulation rather. And the luteal phase follows ovulation, so that's after ovulation. So that's really important, and it just gives us an idea of whether ovulation has taken place or not, how long your follicular phase is, how long your luteal phase is, how long your menstrual cycle phase is, etc. So it's really key to know, and it's really empowering to get to know your body on this kind of intimate level, because as you get charting, and the more that you do, as I said, it normally takes at least 3 cycles to get the gist of it. But once you get the gist of it, you recognize, I think that ovulation is coming, based on your cervical mucus. And then you chart your temperature method as well, just to clarify whether that's actually occurred or not. So that's a good backup. So I recommend doing both of them, because remember, the cervical mucus method will warn the approach of ovulation, whereas the temperature method will clarify whether ovulation has taken place, but it won't warn the approach. So that's why you need to combine both of them. And I would also recommend charting everything or documenting everything on a period app as well, because it's such a valuable tool and great information to keep as well. So doing all those kind of things will help you identify whether you've ovulated or not, and the signs and symptoms of ovulation. So as I said, this is something that I do at the clinic with my patients, and I also do it as a standalone as well. So if you're wanting to get in touch with your body a bit more, and you're wanting to know, when your fertile time is and when it's not, whether it be for conception or contraception, I can definitely help you with that. So I'm a natural fertility educator. So basically I teach you all those things. There's a lot more to it. We have sort of only covered a few basics today, but hopefully it gives you a bit more of an understanding. And it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today. I'm actually going to be doing lives once a week. So I'll be on next week as well on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be talking about something hormone or fertility related next week as well. So definitely come and join me, and I will warn you again when I'm actually going to go live, so that you have time to join. And if you have any questions, pop them down below. If you're watching on my YouTube channel, be sure to actually like. So hit the like button and hit subscribe so that you don't miss the next video. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you all this evening, and I hope you have a really lovely evening. Take care. Bye.